Warning: the following video contains spoilers for the plot of Final Fantasy VII. You have been warned. Also, there are two versions of Final Fantasy VII, the original and the remake series that was made 23 years later. I will be referencing both throughout this video as the major plot points are largely the same. Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily cover Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. And welcome back to Inspired Campaigns, where I talk about how to make Pathfinder, or in this case, Starfinder campaigns inspired by various pop culture franchises. So a while ago, I put up a poll on my community tab asking people what pop culture thing they'd like to see me turn into a Starfinder campaign. And the clear winner was the Final Fantasy franchise, with a focus on Final Fantasy VII. If you don't know, Final Fantasy is a series of Japanese role-playing video games, starting with Final Fantasy I back in the days of the original Nintendo Entertainment System. The franchise has endured over the years up to today with Final Fantasy XVI, plus there are a huge number of spin-off games not part of the mainline numbered series. And while some of these games are very much situated in the realm of medieval fantasy, with Final Fantasy I being heavily inspired by Dungeons & Dragons, many entries are sci-fi enough to be a Starfinder game. So here's the thing about the Final Fantasy games. Each mainline numbered series takes place in a different world, probably. Some people debate if the early entries are in different worlds or not, but it is for sure the case of the later entries. And I cannot cover every Final Fantasy world. So today I'm going to talk about Final Fantasy VII and how to set your game in that world. But with a bit of research, you could set a game in the worlds of Final Fantasy VI, 7, 8, 10, 13, or 15, all using Starfinder rules. All of those games are appropriately science fantasy enough for Starfinder. Now, I will start in on how to make a Final Fantasy game in Starfinder, but before I do, I need to remind everyone to make sure that your players are okay with this game before running it. Don't just spring it on your players. This kind of campaign will involve limiting some player options, so make sure everybody is on board with this before diving into a Final Fantasy game. Another thing to keep in mind is that Final Fantasy games tend to have different mechanics than Pathfinder or Starfinder games. They typically have a magic points from a pool thing instead of the spell slots of Starfinder. Final Fantasy VII in particular has a materia system where holding a particular gem lets people cast spells, and people can't cast spells without the corresponding gem. Also, Final Fantasy VII has a limit break system that isn't easily replicable in Starfinder. You are just going to have to accept that the mechanics of Starfinder won't translate into Final Fantasy VII. This is a video about getting close to Final Fantasy VII's world building, not replicating game mechanics. If you want to have a game with something approaching a limit break system, I suggest the Sentinel Comics RPG system. This narrative TTRPG has a system where taking more damage unlocks stronger and stronger attacks, and you're allowed to trade out powers in between each session, representing swapping out materia. I've actually made the main cast of Final Fantasy VII in Sentinel Comics. They're up on my Patreon for subscribers if you want. One last thing before we get started. Many Final Fantasy games tend to have the same or similar themes and reoccurring motifs. If you want to have a game feel appropriately Final Fantasy-esque, here are some themes to keep in mind. Firstly, many Final Fantasy games have an environmentalist message, with the idea that mortals should respect nature, and that mortals being too greedy can lead to their own destruction. Secondly, there is often the idea that governments should treat their people with respect, and that governments that don't do this are evil. That may seem like a no-brainer, but it shows up a lot. A third common trope is that people should not experiment on sentient creatures to create super soldiers. I don't know why this keeps showing up, but in Final Fantasies 2, 4, 6, 7, and 9, there are all villains who have been experimented on psychologically, physically, or both to turn them into super soldiers. And it always ends poorly. Fourthly, there is the reoccurring idea that a single person or small group can change the world, either for the better or worse. This is mostly an artifact of the games usually having one antagonist and a small group of characters dedicated to stopping them. Oh, and most Final Fantasy games also have chocobos instead of horses. Chocobos are these giant bird things that are mostly flightless. Just use the stats for a Pathfinder terror bird for them. If you get high enough in levels, you can use the advanced animal companion rules for flying creatures to create a flying chocobo, as some can fly, or the stats for the giant toad, as some of them can run on water, but that's about it. Moving on. Sorry for the long intro, but the rest of this video will be on Final Fantasy VII. So, just to give this video some structure, I'm going to break it into sections. First, I'll do a very broad and basic overview of the lore of the Final Fantasy VII world. If you want a more in-depth review, I'll link to another YouTuber who did a deep dive into the lore in the description. Then we'll talk about appropriate ancestries, appropriate classes, available weapons and technology, house rules you may want to implement, and finally, I'll put up a summary so you can see all this stuff at a glance. So, let's get started with the lore. So, the planet of Final Fantasy VII is actually alive, kinda, sorta. See, there's this thing called the life stream that saturates the planet. When a creature is born, it gets a portion of the life stream, and when it passes, that energy returns back to the planet in a never-ending cycle. Also, sometimes life stream energy crystallizes into a sphere that can let people cast magic. These spheres are called materia. I mentioned them earlier. They can be naturally occurring, or materia can be refined on purpose. Speaking of magic, an ethnicity of ancient spiritual humans called the Cetra, or just the Ancients, were able to cast spells without materia, but most people cannot. I mean, kinda, sorta? I guess in the Final Fantasy remake, Yuffie here can do ninja magic without materia, so who knows. I guess materia helps people cast magic, but maybe it isn't required. Anyway, a company known as the Shinra Electric Power Company figures out how to tap into the life stream to create electricity with a thing called a Mako reactor. The problem is that this permanently removes life stream energy from the planet, slowly killing off the world. This can actually be seen in-game. See how this area here, next to a bunch of Mako reactors, is completely devoid of life? Plants cannot grow here because the Mako energy surrounding the area has been sucked up. Speaking of this place, it is called Midgar, and it is essentially a city-state built, owned, and run by Shinra. I mean, technically it has a mayor, but he's just a figurehead. It is a city of haves and have-nots, quite literally. For some stupid reason, the majority of the city lives on these elevated platforms called plates, 300 meters in the sky. They surround a central area called Shinra Tower. Most people of means live up there, whereas the poor live in literal squalor in slums and shantytowns below the plates. While life on the plates is pretty nice, the slums have little to no social safety nets and infrastructure, and Shinra does not care about them because most of them don't have the means to leave and can't make Shinra any more money. And let's talk about Shinra for a second. They are called the Shinra Electric Power Company, but they are into way more than just electricity. If the whole city of haves and have-nots didn't make it obvious, they are completely ethically bankrupt. Not only do they not care about the slums, but they have their own private army, actively develop war machines, and experiment on sentient creatures to try and make them into super soldiers. Yeah, I wasn't kidding about the super soldiers thing. In fact, one such experiment led to the creation of Sephiroth, who was just such a powerful super soldier that he ended up more or less single-handedly winning a war with another city-state called Wutai. And Shinra went to war with Wutai for, let me check my notes, so they could build more Mako reactors, further blighting Wutai's farmlands. Because of course they did. At the start of Final Fantasy VII, you play as members of an eco-terrorist group called Avalanche, and you're trying to destroy Mako reactors to save the planet. You do manage to successfully bomb 2 before Shinra ends up dropping one of the plates on where they think Avalanche is in hopes of killing them. Yes, Shinra unalives 50,000 people, both those living on the plates and underneath it, and causing billions of dollars, or I guess the unit of currency is gil, in property damage, all to try and kill 6 eco-terrorists. And in the remake, they succeed in killing 1 of them. Shinra, you dumb. I mean, they also used it with a disinformation campaign to justify another war with Wutai, so small bonus? No, I'm sorry, this is just comic book levels of villainy. Anyway, Avalanche then assails Shinra Tower to both get revenge and to get one of their friends back, only to find the president of Shinra has been killed by Sephiroth, that super soldier. Yeah, just like several of the other Final Fantasy games, the human experimentation has made Sephiroth mentally unstable, and he's off to destroy the world. The rest of the game is about chasing down Sephiroth and stopping his evil schemes, so that's where I'll end the recap for the game. Here's the thing. By the end of the game, Shinra isn't destroyed. It's considerably reduced in power, and the new President Rufus is trying to take it in a less evil direction, but he's still around, and still has a huge amount of powerful military technology and biotech experiments. Also, it's likely the old corporate structure of be evil, get what we want would still be alive and kicking in some of the corporate executives, if not Rufus. You could have a great Final Fantasy style game with the remains of Shinra trying to claw back their evil power, defying Rufus in secret and planning to overthrow him. Now, for the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about what Starfinder mechanics are appropriate for a Final Fantasy VII game. I'm largely going to do this looking at the cast of the playable characters because that's the lens we have for the game. Just as a quick introduction, Cloud is the protagonist and one of the experimental super soldiers. Tifa is his childhood friend and an expert in martial arts. Barrett is the leader of the eco-terrorists, or at least one cell of it, and has a gun for an arm. Aerith is the descendant of the Cetra and has a mystical connection to the planet and the lifestream. Red 13 is a sentient talking lion dog thing. Yuffie is a ninja from Wutai, that city-state that Shinra attacked. Kate Sith is this thing, we'll talk about him in a second. Side note, yes, I know it should be pronounced Ketshi, but the game calls him Kate Sith, so that's what I'm going to call him. Vincent is another Shinra experiment, and he's dark and brooding and has a gun and can shapeshift. And finally, Sid Highwind is an ace pilot and spear user who wants to become an astronaut, but his dreams were dashed by Shinra. We good to go? Good. Let's look at the cast of Final Fantasy VII to see what ancestries would be appropriate to play in Starfinder. The most obvious and common are humans. Protagonists Barrett, Tifa, Sid, and Yuffie are unambiguously human. Aerith seems to be human, but she is descended from the Cetra, those spiritual humans, and so has some unique connections to magic and the planet. Honestly, I would just count her as an ethnicity of human. I guess you could make her a human Ayuvaran or half-elf if you wanted, and while they say she is the last Cetra in the series, it's possible more are hanging around and just nobody found them. It would be a bit of a retcon, but it would work in a home game. Next is Red 13, that lion dog rat thing. He's also supposedly the last of his kind, but in the epilogue of the original Final Fantasy VII, we see that he has 2 cubs, so maybe some more were hanging around and he just didn't know. If you want to run one of his species, I would say use the Pathfinder Awakened Animal Ancestry for a running animal. That's pretty easy. We also have Cloud and Vincent. Both of these guys, as well as series antagonist Sephiroth, were experimented on by Shinra in different ways. This has made them something other than human, faster, stronger, tougher, more agile, able to leap great distances. I would suggest using Pathfinder's Flesh Warp ancestry for them. That would do a good job of replicating their something other than human nature. Now, Vincent can transform, meaning the Astrozoan ancestry might be the way to go for him, but other than that, yeah, that's how I would do Shinra experiments. And then we have Kate Sith. So I'm sure you see this small cat on screen and think, hey, that's a Sand Roamer Patra, one of those small-sized Patra. Here's the thing, that's not a cat. That is a magical, remote-controlled drone in the shape of a small cat. Because, I don't know, Japan's weird. But yeah, Kate Sith is a small, magical, remote-controlled drone cat thing riding on top of a larger remote-controlled marshmallow thing called Mog. In the original game, the two were inseparable, but in the remake, they can separate. I don't know, man, just if they weren't able to separate like in the first game, I would just say treat them as a single android character. But for them being able to separate, I don't know. Maybe use the Poppet ancestry from Pathfinder. Honestly, a character like that is not going to be common in the Final Fantasy VII world. Moving on to the list of appropriate classes for Final Fantasy VII, let's just go down the list of classes from the core game and talk about them. First off, we have envoys, and yeah, these fit into Final Fantasy VII just fine. I would peg Sid as an envoy, particularly a from-the-front envoy with some sort of spear. I know Sid isn't particularly diplomatic, but charisma is about force of personality, and Sid has a lot of that. Mystic is the next class in the core rulebook, and I think Aerith fits this class perfectly. She has a supernatural connection to the planet and lifestream, making her maybe a primal mystic of some sort. Maybe even go Xenodruid dedication from Galaxy Guide. Operative is pretty easy. I would peg Vincent as an operative given his big pistol. Maybe a skirmisher operative? Also, with a little house ruling, I feel like Yuffie would also be an operative. Find a way to make her giant shuriken count as a gun. That's easier than it sounds because in Starfinder, gun is any ranged weapon that isn't archaic. As for Solarians, strictly speaking, no one is a Solarian, but with a bit of reflavoring, you could say that Solarian weapons are just martial arts. In that case, Red 13 and Tifa, who both attack unarmed, could be Solarians. Heck, some of Red 13's abilities create energy trails and big blasts of energy, so yeah, Solarian with the free hand weapon seems good to me. Soldier is another easy one. Both Cloud and Barret are soldiers, no question. Barret, with his Gatling gun arm, is likely a bombard or action hero soldier, and Cloud is close combat. I know someone is going to say that he should be a Pathfinder fighter or a Giant Instinct barbarian, but just look how many people he's hitting at once. That's clearly the whirling swipe feat. Finally is Witchwarper, and that is the hardest one. I don't think any of the mainline cast are Witchwarpers. But in the final fight, Sephiroth pulls a literal supernova from a parallel dimension to attack the main party, so, I mean, sounds like Witchwarper stuff to me. Stuff like that is at least canon to the universe, leaving the door open for Witchwarper shenanigans. Also, Cait Sith has a bunch of weird and wacky abilities, which I guess you could reflavor to be Witchwarper for that. Next up is equipment that would be good for a Final Fantasy VII game. Well, honestly, with Shinra war machines and super technology, I don't think anything is really out of the question. Looking at weapons, for Cloud, I'd reflavor a Doshko as his Buster Sword. That weapon has the parry trait, and we see how Cloud can use the weapon to parry blows in-game. Barret clearly has a machine gun of some kind. I personally can't find a way to attach it to his arm, but I'm sure we'll get the ability with a few more Starfinder books. Tifa and Red 13 both use unarmed strikes. If you decide not to make them Solarians, you can just use the hard light ham wraps, or if they are Solarians, you can just use Solarian crystals. The only thing that's hard is Aerith, as there isn't a simple staff-like weapon in Starfinder yet, so maybe just import the Pathfinder 2E staff, or use the stats for a baton, as Aerith seems to one-hand her staff. Yuffie has an oversized shuriken, so something like the Octernite Chakram with the returning modification would work. Cait Sith uses a megaphone, and strange as it is, there are sonic weapons in Starfinder, like the replica Zoe microphone, though getting Cait Sith proficient in an advanced weapon like that would be hard. Vincent uses a single big pistol, and there's plenty of those in Starfinder. And finally, Cid uses a spear, and there are plenty of those in Starfinder as well. As for armor, that's a mite trickier. No one in Final Fantasy VII ever puts on new armor, and all armor is relegated to accessory slots like bangles and such. Honestly, I just institute a house rule that armor doesn't look like armor and move on. And of course, a lot of other items work as well. There are magic-like items in Final Fantasy VII, and Starfinder has those. Final Fantasy VII has consumables like health potions, Starfinder has those in the form of serums, it's all good. Notably, there aren't any spaceships in Final Fantasy VII, but there are aircraft and helicopters and such, so you can get some use out of the piloting skill. Lastly, are there any house rules that we need to account for? Well, 1. Materia. Remember, materia are magic gemstones that allow you to cast magic spells or get other abilities like increased health. To me, this kinda sounds like a Pathfinder spell heart. These items are attached to a sword or armor and give you some special ability and let you cast spells. Now, I think rules as written you cannot cast a spell with them unless you are already a spellcaster, but if a house ruled that that wasn't the case, I'd say they do a decent job of standing in for materia. Another option for materia is to use Aeon Stones. If Aeon Stones are slotted into gear that has the Aeon trait, they can allow people to cast spells. So if you house ruled that more items have the Aeon trait, you'd be good to go. Okay, I'll throw up a summary on screen right now so you can have it at a glance and screenshot it if you want. And there we go. And that's it for my view on how to make a Starfinder campaign based on Final Fantasy VII. How did I do? Would you do something differently? Let me know in the comments below. Just try and remember to be civil. Hey, as a reminder, I have a Patreon. I'm going to try and post something fun there once a month, but honestly, it's just a way to help this channel keep financially viable. Just a few bucks a month, and I'm toying with the idea of adding a limited higher tier where you can request a specific video. Let me know what you think. I also have a Discord channel, link in the description. Drop by and say hi. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That tells not only me, but also YouTube that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming!